Welcome back, my fellow strangers, to another episode of Traversing the Strange World. And it is me, your host, Isaiah, aka Peace. Today I will be talking to you about a brief history of the use of cannabis. So here we go. All right, when people hear the word cannabis today, they tend to think of one or two things: either a modern legal industry or a dangerous drug that society fought for a long time against. But that framing is actually very new. For most of human history, cannabis wasn't a controversy. It was just a plant, fiber, and medicine, food source, and sometimes a doorway into altered or sacred states. To understand how cannabis, something so ancient, became so criminalized and is now becoming normalized again, we have to go way back. As usual, my fellow strangers, we have to dissect the snowball. Cannabis likely evolved in central northern China and Central Asia. Archaeological evidence from Neolithic China shows hemp fibers being used for rope and fabric as far back as 10 to 12,000 years ago, making it one of the earliest cultivated plants we know of. For most of this early period, cannabis wasn't about getting high, it was about survival. Hemp was used for rope and nets, clothing, sackcloth, paper, seed oil, food, and lamps. The psychoactive side existed, but it wasn't the main attraction yet. By around 2700 BCE, Chinese medical traditions attributed legendary Emperor Shenyang. He lists cannabis as a remedy for pain, inflammation, and rheumatism and illness. Later, also, physicians reportedly used cannabis mixed with wine as an early surgical anesthetic. So right from the beginning, cannabis isn't framed as a vice, it's framed as medicine. In ancient India, cannabis moves beyond medicine into religion and ritual. It appears in three main forms: bhang, a drink made from leaves, most likely from boiling the leaves into a tea; ganja, a term we're all familiar with, which was dried flower, the flower that many of us smoke today we buy from dispensaries or from our homeboy; Karas, resin or hash. So this is going to be dabs or keef. In Hindu tradition, cannabis is deeply linked to Shiva, the god of destruction, transformation, and asceticism. During festivals like Holi and Maha Shivaratri, drinking bhang is believed to cleanse sin, dissolve the ego, bring the devotee closer to Shiva. In some tantric traditions, cannabis is viewed as a tool to quiet the mind, awaken inner energy, enter mystical or non-dual states of awareness. Here, cannabis isn't recreational, it's sacramental. Moving westward, we run into the Scythians, the nomadic horse cultures of Central Asia. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, describes the Scythians throwing cannabis onto hot stones and inside enclosed tents, inhaling the vapor, inhaling with joy. For a long time, historians weren't sure whether to take that seriously. But in 2019, archaeologists found burnt cannabis with high THC content in a 2,500-year-old cemetery in Western China, confirming that these ritual hotbox style practices were very real. All right, here's where it gets interesting, my fellow strangers. I talked about this back on the original Strange Dreams episode, but we're going to cover it again because this is part of the history of cannabis. In southern Israel, about 35 miles south of Jerusalem, lies the site of Tal Rat, an Iron Age fortress from the time of the Kingdom of Judah. Excavations there in the 1960s uncovered a small shrine with 2 stone altars buried at the end of the 8th century BCE. For decades, scientists couldn't identify the blackened residue on those altars, but in a study published in 2020, researchers used modern chemical analysis to do what earlier tools could not. They found that one altar contained frankincense, the aromatic incense known from ancient cultic worship mentioned in the Bible. The other altar contained chemical traces of cannabis, including THC, CBD, and CBN, mixed with animal dung, likely used to regulate how the plant burned. This isn't a fringe theory. The scientists, including archaeologists Aaron Ari and chemist Davari Namdar, published their findings in a peer-reviewed archaeology journal, confirming that this is the first known evidence of psychoactive cannabis in the cult use in the Kingdom of Judah. What makes the finding especially compelling is the context. The shrine at Tel Arad appears architecturally similar to what the first temple in Jerusalem, Solomon's temple, would have looked like. That similarity has led some researchers to suggest that cannabis also may have been incense or ritual substance in the Jerusalem temple itself, part of the worship alongside frankincense. In other words, 2,700 years ago, worshippers in Judah may have deliberately burned cannabis not as a casual herb, but as a psychoactive component of ritual practice, intended to induce altered states of consciousness during sacred ceremonies. This ancient find widens our understanding of cannabis in pre-modern religion, showing that even in what later became strict monotheistic traditions, mind-altering plants could have played a sacred role. In the Greco-Roman world, cannabis continues as medicine for pain and earaches, a key fiber crop for ropes and sails. In the medieval Islamic world, cannabis, especially hashish, spreads widely. Some Sufi mystics believed hashish could quiet the rational thought, open the heart to divine love, and allow mystical union with God. At the same time, religious authorities debated and often condemned its use. So again, we see the pattern. Cannabis sits at the intersection of medicine, mysticism, and controversy. In medieval Europe, cannabis most likely goes back to being practical. Hemp becomes strategically essential. Ropes, sails, cloth, naval power, entire empires depend on it. Most medieval herbal lists list cannabis as a standard medical plant. There's nothing especially scandalous about it. Things get interesting in the 1800s. British doctors in colonial India start studying what they call Indian hemp. They report benefits for pain, muscle spasms, insomnia, mood disorders, and cannabis tinctures become common in European and American pharmacies, legal all over the counter medicine. At the same time, in Paris, artists and writers from Club des Hachishans, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce that, and figures like Baudelaire and Alexandre Dumas experiment with hashish, believing it opens the subconscious and fuels creativity. Cannabis becomes respectable medicine, a cult sacrament, and bohemian curiosity all at once. Then we get over to the Americas. Hemp is grown widely in colonial America for rope and textiles. But in the early 20th century, psychoactive cannabis use called marijuana becomes associated in the U.S. with Mexican migrants, black jazz musicians, working class communities. This is where the tone shifts. By the 1910s and 1920s, local and state bans start appearing, often driven by racism and xenophobia. Sensational newspapers and films claim cannabis causes insanity, it leads to murder, and corrupts the youth. The most infamous example is Reefer Madness, which portrays marijuana as instantly turning teenagers into violent lunatics. So I've watched Reefer Madness before, and there's this one scene that I remember in particular where there's these young guys, they're all, they're smoking a joint, and the next thing you know, they're walking down the street. They have these soda pops and these glass bottles because everything was glass back then. And then they can't get the cap off, so they take the bottle and bang it into the brick wall, busting the end off, and then they drink it, cut their mouths with the glass. They're smiling and bleeding, just totally aloof. And next thing you know, one of them's in court and he's begging the judge, please, please. And the judge is like, son, I bet if you knew the risks, you wouldn't have taken that first hit of that marijuana cigarette. Funny how times change. And then we have the Rastafarian community arising around this time. And for Rastafarians, cannabis isn't a vice, it's holy. Ganja is used as a sacrament, a tool for meditation, reasoning sessions, prayer, communal bonding, and heightened awareness of Jah or God. It's meant to still the ego, open the heart, help the mind, reason clearly and righteously. Importantly, it's not about escapism. It's not about intoxication for pleasure. It's about alignment. Rastas often reference biblical passages like Psalms and Genesis that speak of herbs given to humanity, viewing cannabis as a part of divine provision, not corruption. In this tradition, cannabis is closer to incense or wine than a party drug. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act effectively bans cannabis at the federal level. Medicine is replaced with fear. Post-World War II international treaties pushed cannabis prohibition worldwide. In 1970, the U.S. classifies cannabis as a Schedule I, no medical use, high abuse potential. So it would seem as though that America was the one really pushing this agenda. Ironically, at the same time, hippies, anti-war protesters, rocky musicians embraced cannabis as a symbol of resistance. Enforcement disproportionately and inappropriately targets Black and Latino communities, despite similar usage rates across races, fueling mass incarceration. In the 1980s and 90s, AIDS and cancer patients pushed back, reporting cannabis helps with nausea, pain, and appetite. Underground compassion clubs emerged. In 1996, California passes Proposition 215, launching the modern medical cannabis movement. Scientists discover the endocannabinoid system, revealing that the human body is literally wired to interact with cannabinoids. In the 2010s, Uruguay becomes the first country to fully legalize. Canada follows. U.S. states legalize in a patchwork. Today, cannabis exists simultaneously as a billion-dollar legal industry, a medicine, a countercultural symbol, and a sacred plant, depending on who you ask. For most of human history, cannabis wasn't demonized. It was integrated. The question is, why did people use it? The question isn't why did people use it? The question is, why did we decide it was evil in the first place? And maybe, what else have we forgotten about the plants that we once walked beside? All right, everybody. That was a brief history of cannabis. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you were enjoying a little bit of cannabis while you listen to this episode. Maybe I was enjoying a little bit of cannabis while I was making this episode. Who knows? But until next time, my fellow strangers, let's always be inquisitive. Let's always be curious. We kind of just walked into this life thing. So let's always remember to be neighborly to folks, because at the end of the day, we're all just strangers in a strange land. Until next time, peace. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
This is the outro. See you next time, strangers.